Okay, so my point with the key information is out there. But if we show you apparatus and you go, well, that's not good. You just saw the apparatus. That's simple. There, you could see probably more of them. You could tour labs. You know, there's ways to get your hands on this apparatus and stuff. But you know, if somebody gives you a video, you know, and you're ignoring that, don't just say you're a skeptic. You're a denier of it. You've seen it, and you. But why claim you haven't seen it as a way of denying it? It's just, do you realize that's what you're doing? There was the equipment, 30-second search, you know, to find that. It wasn't the greatest, but it was 30 seconds worth of search too. Okay, like fourth down looked like it had machinery in it, so I checked, scanned through. Okay, they're showing it. Now the point is, the crystal obviously influences the photon. When you put a crystal in front of the slit, turns out the pattern goes back into this regular two bar or two spot. A two bar, you know, depending how tall the slit is. I guess if you assume the slit is tall, then you get the two bars, you know. And you get, in other words, that's the particle behavior. If you take that crystal out, then you get wave interference behavior. The quantum erasure stuff is like, hey, you can put the crystal in there, and if you erase the information that it gave you, then you can get an interference pattern in the end. What? Okay, that's fucking weird, because if the crystal makes it turn in, because of some kind of scattering effects, into this pattern, how the hell would it turn back in after it's gone through the crystal? How could it turn back into the other pattern? Okay, so there's some genuinely weird stuff there, and you know there is key information. Um, you know, and if you want to be skeptical about all of it as it's given to you, fine. But people are bringing it to you, then you know what? I'm also going to be like, well, why are you in denial? I mean, you've been told these things. There's places to go get it. I didn't make it up. I got it from places, you know. And I have a philosophy degree myself. I'm not a physicist, you know, but I did take college level physics out of interest in exactly these questions. Okay, I never intended to be a physicist. It was just because I too was curious about this kind of stuff. Um, Now, you mentioned, oh, the laser isn't like a gun. It's not like a bullet because it doesn't come out straight. Bullets don't come out straight of guns either, right? If you go bang, 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 bang with the gun on a tripod, it doesn't go exactly the same spot every time. And this is just a part of physics, right? You shoot anything, a laser, anything, it's going to go out in a cone. Now, you, with your high specifications of your gun or your laser, you could get that cone smaller, but it's always spreading out, always. Okay, and you simply adjust your specifications so you don't get so specific that you aim it through one slit, right? If you make it the cone so small that you shine it just on one slit, then it's a one slit experiment. So you have to make that beam big enough. And you have to do the same thing with the gun. If you fire a gun at two slits, but a really accurate gun that just goes through one slit, you don't get the two spots that we're talking about. But you would get it with the gun that has some inaccuracy, like all guns have, but big enough that the inaccuracy is bigger than the distance between the slits. Okay, on the technical thing, look, I don't know the language, but these are good technical terms. What's going on with waves when they go through those slits is called diffraction. Okay, diffraction is the part that makes them spread out. You know, it's called diffraction. It's based on the wavelength, and like I was saying, the it changes the size of the ripples, and the size of the slit based is related to the size of the wavelength. They're exactly the same, and those waves will go through and do a diffraction thing, and it's called diffraction. And refraction is when light goes from one substance into another, like from air into a crystal. Okay, and it splits waves up into rainbows, as we know, because it's based, the angle that of refraction is based on the wavelength, and the angle of diffraction is based on the wavelength. And the other thing is called scattering. Okay, that's what particles do in terms of going through a slit and hitting the sides and things like this. And photons can also scatter, you know, behaving as particles. Okay, and that just implies that, you know, there's some randomness introduced into their directions. So it's not refraction in the two-slit experiment. It's a diffraction pattern. Okay, and it is different because one is when light goes, or any wave goes from one material into a different kind of material. Like let's say you had a vat and there's a flexible plastic barrier in the middle to hold oil and water separate. If you made water waves, they'd hit that barrier and they would go into the oil, but there would be refraction. Right? If they're coming in at an angle, they'd be bent. If they go in straight, okay, the wavelength would still probably change. It would for sure change. So, but that's not refraction. So anyway, so those are just the terms. And, I think that if you want to be a debunker, you have to be extra careful looking at the primary evidence. There's issues like the fact that, as I was saying, if a wet dog is shaking, the harder it shakes, more water might come off of it, but also they come off at a higher velocity. That doesn't happen with wave phenomena. You put more energy into an antenna, you don't get photons at a higher velocity. You get more of them, and that's why there's more energy. They come off at the same velocity. That also shows a wave-like phenomena, right? When I'm shooting a bullet off of a train, the velocity of the bullet is the muzzle velocity plus the velocity on the train. Okay, but if I shoot light or sound off of that, it's not like that. The speed is based on the medium, and the speed relative to me will be based on my speed relative to the medium, if I have such a speed. So those are the things that are fundamentally different here. And then the other thing is this idea, seriously, you're trying to get explanations. This is the weird thing. Okay, when you are making a smaller and smaller ripple in the electromagnetic medium, eventually you'll notice that instead of a ripple, you get this single particle, and it seems to go in a particular path. And the way it seems is you put, for example, a CCD, a camera up there, and you collect it. It seems like it went there. Okay, and no other camera will collect that photon. But the weird thing is it still seems like, on some level, namely in the quantum field, it's still a ripple. It goes out like a ripple. Now, this is not bad news for you and some of your sensibilities. This is what Einstein was trying to get back. He didn't like the particulate idea. There had to be a sense of continuity. The ripple has a continuity. Wave functions are continuous. Okay. And so then how bad a news is it that somehow we're just getting a cross-section? We're seeing some cross-section. So some people said, well, the whole ripple is collapsing into this cross-section we see. Some people say, oh, the whole ripple exists forever. Really, I think it's at least some combination, because we know just like that the ripples can split, and waves can split apart. They can also converge. You can have standing waves, and there's all kinds of regularity in systems that have waves bouncing around in them. But anyway, yeah, thanks for the reply, and yes, I acknowledge that you were specifically talking about the crystals having an effect. I acknowledge they do have an effect, but that doesn't really save it. It's weird, the effect they have. The question is how and why do they have the effect. Cheers.